defending NFC North champion Bears still unsure about who will protect Caleb Williams' blind side. 4 players remain in the mix to claim the left tackle spot with less than 3 weeks until the start of the season. This is a sneaky, enormous story in the NFL. Here's Ben Johnson.
It's a hot spot for us. Obviously, we talk about it almost every time I'm up here, and yet I don't know that we are 100% sold on who that guy's going to be for Carolina yet. We're going to still work through it. That's where today's going to be huge for us. Thursday's going to be huge for us, and Saturday's going to be huge for us as well.
This is not a good place to be if you are the Bears. And if you've been watching the show over the summer, I know, everyone's schedule is a little different sometimes. I want to be super high on the Bears because I love the combination of Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. But everything about the defense, including the significant injury to Kobe Bryant, their big acquisition, and now they got problems on both sides of their offensive line. This is a little bit of nervous time for these Bears.
Yes, if there's a sliver of hope to be, Ozzie Trapillo, who's a very capable guy who tore a patella tendon, was taken off of PUP, so hopefully he'll be ready to go sooner rather than later, because they certainly could have kept him on there for the first 4 games. So without question, this is a massive concern. I do think Ben Johnson, when you talk to people about defending Sean McVay when they don't have a great line, he could kind of cover for it. I think Ben Johnson has that ability to be a quick game, certainly slide protection, but going into the season with a franchise quarterback, left tackle is not the question you want to have.
The most popular phrase I hear around the Bears sometimes from people like you, Clarky, and I don't mean that accusingly, is candidate for regression. All right?
Yeah.
Do you believe the Bears are on that list?
I'm not on the Bill Barnwell ready to put them in the bottom 5 regression candidates. Ben Johnson mentioned it recently that everybody's talking about them being regressive. But to me, offensive line was the biggest part of the story last year. You had a guy like Drew Dahlman at center, instantly changed that line. He retired. We've got the injuries up front. Caleb Williams still holds on to the ball for far too long. In fact, he's some of the longest time to pass in the history of football last year. He's going to keep doing it. That's his game. You mentioned quick game. He doesn't like doing quick game. He likes being able to see everything come there. So I think you got to have the offensive line settled. And if not, yeah, they're going to regress.
Yeah, you know what? I think that Caleb's going to evolve, though. I do believe that playing within structure, playing on time in rhythm, that's been a big point of emphasis when it comes to Ben Johnson and the way in which he has communicated this to Caleb. And there's plenty of snaps last year that you see him do it, but you're right. It needs to become a little bit more of a commonplace thing for him. Look, the bigger question for me is this. Look, Darnell Wright went down. Their all-pro right tackle went down with an elbow injury in practice just the other day. There's no clarity, like real definitive clarity is about what his status is going to be. But you're right. As these injuries keep piling up, and in particular on the offensive line, if you have issues at both offensive tackle positions and the changeover at center, that was a strength for them last year. Their offensive line moved people off the line of scrimmage. You remember that Philadelphia game last year when they went into Philadelphia and just absolutely was demoing that defensive line? That's what their hallmark is. This is a very scary situation for Chicago right now, because as much as we all love them and love the fact that, look, Ben Johnson here, second year with Caleb Williams, Luther Burden, the tight end room, look, there's a lot to be optimistic about. But as we know, injuries are the great equalizer, and that's what could be their downfall this year. I am with you. I do not like this. Look, teams are just going to naturally regress just because they are. I don't believe that. When you don't have your best players, this could be an issue.
Yeah. I think the reason they regressed, though, another key stat, they forced 33 turnovers. Yeah. That bailed them out of a lot of bad defensive drives. Without a pass rush. That is really hard to regress.
And they won all these late games. I mean, they won all these games that they were losing at the very end, and Caleb pulled one miracle out of another.
But see, in the end, ultimately determines whether a team regresses or not, whether or not your team is better. Period. From a personal standpoint. And if people... if people keep getting hurt, if guys like Darnell Wright can't get on the football field and go behind guys, you keep keeping people like that, you're going to regress. That's going to ultimately do this.
I love it. Everyone's talking about them regressing, and he's talking about breaking the scoring record. In a step-by-step explanation, players who have declared for and the draft of the NFL, NBA, or WNBA and did not withdraw can't play. If they sign a contract with the NFL, NBA, G League, or WNBA, they can't play. if they've been listed on the roster of an NFL, NBA, G League, or WNBA team, they can't play. So they made all those rules yesterday. The president of LSU was one of those who voted in favor of those rules yesterday, while the football coach at LSU was on Pat McAfee's show explaining why he's going to take one of those players, in fact, maybe more than one of those players, and have him on their team this year. It is as confusing as it sounds, so we brought on all of the right people to try and explain it to you. Paul Feinbaum back with us, and again, Pete Thamel, who covers this stuff as well as anybody could. So, Pete, that's where it begins, all right? First the Big Ten, and then the SEC announced these very strict, clearly defined rules yesterday. So why isn't it as simple as that?
Well, it's never simple, right, Greeny? In college athletics, there's no simple solutions to anything, as we've seen, especially in the last 5 years since NIL came into play. Let's peek ahead, Greeny, to what's next here, right? How is this showdown between LSU and the SEC and between these players and this SEC rule going to happen? Now, players have a very good argument. Their lawyers laid it out to me yesterday on text. It's on Twitter, where basically there is already a state injunction, a state temporary restraining order that specifically says they should be allowed to play. And it generally does account for the rules that the SEC made. So in order for the SEC to do this, they're going to have to go backwards against a state rule. Obviously, that ruling was made in Baton Rouge, Louisiana for a reason, right, Greeny? LSU anticipated something like this happening, and these 16 players, some of whom are going to other schools, including UCLA, all have the wording that seemingly would protect them from some of these rules. The interesting part about that graphic that you popped up about what the SEC is doing is Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, has autonomy to dole out punishments in this, and he was sort of given unilateral autonomy from the SEC presidents yesterday in this case. So what we have here is something we've seen a few times in the last 5 years in college athletics. We have essentially 15 college presidents aligned against one, right? I know Wade Rouse, the LSU president, did technically vote, but LSU clearly is not in favor of this. They want these guys to play. We were 15-1 in the Big Ten in the Connor Stallions case, right? We saw how that ended up for Jim Harbaugh. He was suspended 3 games, but there was tension. It was not easy. It was 15-1 in the Big 12 in the Brendan Sorsby saga. Again, that took a federal court filing for the Big 12 to finally get their way and for Sorsby to not be able to play. So there are clear tension points coming here. There's been no certain declaration of whether the current TRO would allow these guys to play. The lawyers think that Daquan Wright is eligible right now. So it'll be fascinating to see what next steps are from the players' side if they refile for a new TRO to get clarified language, or if they just go and try to play for LSU.
My goodness. So, I mean, Paul, it's all so fascinating that I struggle to even come up with questions. I just want you all to keep talking because I just need to keep hearing about this. Paul, what is your reaction and what are the reactions of the people that you're talking to and hearing from?
Well, here's what's so interesting, and just hold on for a second. Instead of Lane Kiffin calling his president yesterday, he went to somebody far more important. He went on McAfee because he knows the audience is bigger and what people say there is more influential. So, I mean, I think Kiffin is pretty bright here in how he's approaching it. The president doesn't matter. And Pete is so right. He voted that way because he had 15 other people in that room staring him down, and he didn't want to run the risk of putting his entire institution and the money, and I mean the millions that come from the SEC in jeopardy. So he said, yeah, I'll go along with it. We've all been there before, local PTA, fraternities, it doesn't matter. So now I think the real question is, what does Kiffin and these lawyers do? There was some reporting yesterday by CBS Sports, Greeny, that indicated that Kiffin has encouraged all these guys to file lawsuits. Now, I don't know how you can document all that, but it's an interesting aspect of how rogue this story is, how much of an outcast Lane Kiffin continues to be, and the island that the school, LSU, is sitting on right now.
So I have a lawyer to my right, so I wanted to keep Tannenbaum in this conversation. If the players are going to file motions or injunctions or whatever it is one files in a circumstance like this, in English, as close to in English as we can get, what exactly would that be, and what do you think would be the result of it?
Sure, Greedy, as Pete alluded to, they'll go back to that same judge in Baton Rouge and get another TRO, temporary restraining order, with language that says, despite what the conference ruled yesterday, we are eligible to play because of this new, 5-year rule, and therefore we relied on your ruling, Your Honor. We relied on these presumed offerings from Lane Kiffin, and we would be, severely harmed if these rulings weren't enforced. And now I'm sure what the SEC or the Big Ten would do would try to take it to federal court and look for a judge that would enforce their ability to govern their schools.
So, at the risk of asking a stupid question, a court ruling
Yes.
supersedes